आप सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। नेटवर्क न्यूज़ 18 के माध्यम से सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स के विषय में आयोजित सेकंड एडिशन में मुझे सम्मिलित करने के लिए आयोजकों का मैं आभारी हूं। इस उपक्रम के माध्यम से एसडीजी इस विषय पर होने वाली चर्चा के जरिए संपूर्ण राज्यों सहित पूरे देश में शाश्वत विकास होने के लिए काफ़ी मददगार साबित होंगे। आप सभी जानते हैं कि इंडिया की आबादी में महाराष्ट्र की हिस्सेदारी करीब 10% है। इसमें शहरी आबादी की हिस्सेदारी 45.2% है, जो राष्ट्रीय औसत के मुकाबले ज़्यादा है। अपने देश के लिए एसडीजी हासिल करने के वास्ते राज्य सरकारों के साथ पार्टनरशिप भी उतनी ही अहम है। ज़्यादातर फंक्शन जिनका एसडीजी पर असर पड़ सकता है वे संविधान के 7वें शेड्यूल के स्टेट या कंकरेंट लिस्ट में है। इससे हासिल करने में राज्य सरकारों की महत्वपूर्ण जिम्मेदारी का संकेत मिलता है। महाराष्ट्र इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट प्रॉस्परस स्टेट्स इन इंडिया एंड इट इज आल्सो नोन एज द फाइनेंशियल कैपिटल ऑफ द कंट्री। हाउएवर, प्रायोरिटी एरियाज फॉर इंटरवेंशन फॉर एसडीजीज रिमेन पॉवर्टी, हंगर, जेंडर इक्वेलिटी एंड सस्टेनेबल सिटीज। महाराष्ट्र में ग्रामीण विकास के लिए एसडीजी का क्षेत्रीय स्तर स्थानीयकरण बहुत जरूरी है। अगर समाज के अंतिम व्यक्ति तक विकास के फायदे नहीं पहुंचते हैं तो फिर यह विकास समग्र और समावेशी नहीं कहलाएगा। महाराष्ट्र में पिछले महीने में पुणे में इसी विषय पर राष्ट्रीय कार्यशाला का आयोजन किया था। एसडीजी का पंचायत राज के माध्यम से अमल में लाने के बारे में इसी कार्यशाला में विस्तृत चर्चा भी हुई थी। महाराष्ट्र सरकार और मुंबई कॉरपोरेशन में क्लाइमेट एक्शन प्लान का ऐलान किया है। इसे मुंबई क्लाइमेट एक्शन प्लान नाम दिया गया है। इसका मकसद 2050 तक कार्बन उत्सर्जन खत्म करना है। यह न सिर्फ महाराष्ट्र में बल्कि पूरे देश में सस्टेनेबल सिटीज के लिए रोड मैप बनने में पहला अहम कदम हो सकता है। मुंबई 2020 में C40 सिटीज नेटवर्क में भी शामिल हो गया था। C40 सिटीज क्लाइमेट लीडरशिप ग्रुप ऐसे 97 शहरों का एसोसिएशन है जो ग्रीन हाउस गैस उत्सर्जन में कमी लाकर क्लाइमेट रिस्क घटाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। दुनिया का आबादी का 12वां हिस्सा और ग्लोबल ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट के 1/4 हिस्से का प्रतिनिधित्व यह ग्रुप करता है। ESG में यानी सोशल में भविष्य में कई जॉब्स के मौके पैदा करने और साथ ही पूर्ण विकास के लिए एडवांस विजन की संभावना है। हमें ESG कल्चर बनाने की जरूरत है। इस बदलाव को लाने की जिम्मेदारी किसी व्यक्ति या सिर्फ सरकार की नहीं हो सकती है। बेहतर भविष्य के लिए यह सभी साझेदारों के लिए है। इस प्रोग्राम में मुझे अपनी बात रखने का मौका दिया, इसलिए मैं ऑर्गेनाइजर को एक बार फिर से धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूं। नमस्ते, जय हिंद, जय महाराष्ट्र।
InBev और नेटवर्क 18 ने जो इंडस्ट्री के बारे में एक प्लेटफॉर्म क्रिएट किया है उसका मैं स्वागत करता हूं और उनका अभिनंदन भी करता हूं। महाराष्ट्र राज्य ने हर बार इंडस्ट्री को सपोर्ट किया है, चाहे वो इंसेंटिव स्कीम हो, सब्सिडी स्कीम हो, हमेशा महाराष्ट्र स्टेट इंडस्ट्री के साथ रहा है। सिंगल विंडो सिस्टम रहे या मल्टी मॉडल लॉजिस्टिक पार्क अभी जो नया गडकरी साहब के नेतृत्व में आ रहे हैं वो रहे, या अल्ट्रा मेगा प्रोजेक्ट रहे, उनको हर बार महाराष्ट्र स्टेट ने सपोर्ट किया है। बेरोजगारी जो है वो दूर करने के लिए महाराष्ट्र सरकार, महाराष्ट्र राज्य प्रयत्न कर रहा है और उसमें हम सबको माननीय मुख्यमंत्री एकनाथ जी शिंदे और उप मुख्यमंत्री देवेंद्र जी के नेतृत्व में यश आएगा। पर्यावरण पूरक इंडस्ट्री जो है वो लाने का भी हम प्रयास कर रहे हैं। कल भी मैं चाकण, तलेगांव, दाभाडे, रांजणगांव, टीटीसी, ये जो हमारे बड़े इंडस्ट्रियल एरिया है वहाँ मैंने विजिट की। वहाँ जो उद्योजक है, वहाँ जो इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट है, उनको क्या प्रॉब्लम्स है वो मैंने वहाँ खुद जाके उनके साथ मीटिंग की है। इसलिए मेरे ख्याल से आपने जो ये प्लेटफॉर्म क्रिएट करके दिया है ये अच्छी बात है। मैं उसका स्वागत करता हूँ, आपका अभिनंदन करता हूँ और ऐसे प्रोग्राम में महाराष्ट्र स्टेट आपके साथ है ये वादा भी करता हूँ।
Namaste and welcome to yet another round of conversations around Sustainability 100 Plus. This is an endeavor here at Network 18 in partnership with AB and Bev, and we're going state by state. So we're also going to build up to a national level conversation and, of course, the Sustainability 100 Plus Awards. But right now, we're going state by state. What is each state trying to do? What are the challenges there? And overall, can it contribute to nearly 25% of the world's population becoming conscious about what they are going to do to ensure that the next 100 years and beyond, there are generations which will have a cleaner, greener, and of course, a much more healthier planet Earth. What is it that we're going to do today to secure our tomorrow? So that's where the conversations are. And we are in Maharashtra, a state whose deputy chief minister and former chief minister, while speaking with me not so long ago, said that we have set the vision of a 1 trillion economy even before Uttar Pradesh and Yogi Adityanath spoke about it. And we will get to 1 trillion economy. Maharashtra is also the engine for our growth, one of the growth engines in our country. And of course, we have the financial capital of our nation, Mumbai city, and many who would call it, or Mumbaikars would call it as Amchi Mumbai. But how much is sustainability part of this entire discourse? So let's challenge some of our panelists today. Very, very August panel that we've been able to put together to have a very engaging conversation. So without much further ado, let me introduce all of them to our viewers here. Gyanesh Chaudhary ji is Vice Chairman and MD Vikram Solar. He's with us. So Gyanesh, namaste. Thank you very much. We'll get chatting after I introduce everybody else. Dr. Sanjay Kolte, CEO Pune Smart City. That is the PSC DCL is also with us. Sanjay ji, namaste. The Vishloka Nath, Head of Sustainability Tata Trust is with us. Head of Policy and Advocacy, Tata Trust, and Acting CEO, India Climate Collaborative. There is a lot that the Tatas have been doing. Rajat Gupta, Senior Partner and Lead Sustainability Practice Asia with McKinsey is with us. Rajat ji, namaste. Friend in India. Niranjan Hiranandani ji is also with us, co-founder and MD Hiranandani Group. He needs no introduction. His group needs no introduction. They are championing a lot as far as the infrastructural push is concerned. So from residential operations itself to also now powering industrial growth engines, warehousing. He's spreading his wings, he and his group. But is it sustainable? So Niranjanji, I'm going to ask you that. I have huge respect for him. And we have Ashish Palta, Vice President Sales, AB Bev India. They've been doing something phenomenal globally, and we're proud to have them as our partners into the second season. They haven't tired of us, we haven't tired of them, and we're enjoying having these sustainability conversations. So which is fantastic. Yes, it's a very serious subject, but we'd like to keep the conversation free flowing. So let me start with Shlokaji, and let me ask you this. How far are we from being a sustainability conscious nation? And especially Maharashtra, which has been the growth engine, there is a huge amount of possibilities, but there are also a huge amount of challenges. So I'd like you to take this forward.
It's a huge question. Thank you for coming to me first. So look, let me just preface this by saying, half of India's populations are going to live in cities by 2050. And so you cannot talk about net zero ambition without talking about the ability of our cities to actually transition to those necessary low carbon systems. So you're looking at things like urban infrastructure, buildings, flyovers, waste management facilities, etc. All of that, of course, ultimately presents a challenge to climate risks, but it's also an opportunity. So I think what we really need to do is actually reframe the way we're looking at the net zero challenge. There's a lot of action today that we can take to ensure that the infrastructure is low carbon. And also, quite honestly, beyond our contribution to sustainability goals and targets, what I really want to emphasize today is that low carbon urbanization, sustainability goals, they can also provide the economic and social co-benefits that this country desperately requires. So that, low carbon strategies can spur job creation in the private sector and local government. India's tremendous urban transition actually demands a very radical transformation of our built environment, our transportation and energy sectors. And so in order to ensure that we're not, locked into these very unsustainable trajectories, we know we have to decarbonize our systems, but that really is a tremendous opportunity to do right and do well. So I want to just ensure that as we have this conversation today, we're also looking at the benefits of transitioning.
It's hugely beneficial. I totally agree, and there is no doubt about that at all, Shlokaji. Because, like you said, it's a gamut of opportunities. So you can look at it as a problem, or you can look at it as an opportunity, and it clearly is an opportunity. But Rajatji, what we are expecting India to do is to move from a Pentium 486 directly to an octa-core. So and just skip the entire evolution process in between, especially with infrastructure, and especially with the way we have planned ourselves mindlessly, or now we have got to do it mindfully. So how do we do that?
Well, I think there are clear examples of when it's been done before, right? So in some ways, if you look at the digital revolution and the way it's played out in India with the Gem Trinity and so on, we have leapfrogged in the past. So there's no reason not to be able to do that. Let me throw some statistics to this. 75% of what India will be in 25 to 30 years is not yet been built, assuming some growth rates for the country. So when so much of our country hasn't been built, there's going to be a significant amount of investment. The question is whether this investment can be done right and can be done in a low carbon manner or not. Now, that's not to say that there aren't challenges. Technologies are not ready. Battery, for example, is not yet at the right cost. Hydrogen, which is a decarbonizing force, is not yet at the right cost. But there are other things that are in the money. I'm sure you hear about this, but solar, for example, by virtue of both a combination of our regulations as well as the technology price reduction, is in the money. Fuel for two-wheelers is pretty much in the money on a total cost of ownership basis. So I think we have an opportunity here, as Shloka said, and there are forces, both tailwinds as well as there are some headwinds.
Yeah, they are. Let's take Pune, for example, Sanjay. So much of opportunity in Pune. It's become the educational hub, fast becoming even a startup hub and a processing hub. We've seen certain parts of Pune, which used to be outskirts, now part of the city. I've gone there just recently, and I've seen it's evolved, it's grown, and people, it's bustling. It's no longer a small, city which is a 4-hour, 5-hour drive from Mumbai. It has now become just almost like a next door neighbor to Mumbai. That's how this city has spread. But has it been mindful or mindless? Concerns with ecology, concerns with the way the planning has been done. Is it going to put more pressure, or is it going to ease? How easy or difficult is it going to be for Pune to become net zero?
Yeah. As you said, the growth is really phenomenal. If you look at the city from all angles, as you said, from the manufacturing sector, the automobile sector, the IT sector, all these are contributing to the rapid growth of the city. At the same time, there is a huge responsibility on the urban local body and Pune Smart City and the various city administration agencies to cope up with the requirements and needs of the city. I would emphasize the preparedness of urban local body or Pune Municipal Corporation in a way that they have been working in the direction of having their policy support, solid policy support in this direction of moving towards low carbon economy or climate friendly initiatives. And they are, say, leaders amongst the ULBs to formulate certain policies like creation of, you can say, carbon emission inventory, which was created in 2012 itself. Then they have their Pune Air Action Plan, Air Quality Action Plan of 2019, the Pune City Resilience Strategy of 2019, the Climate Action Plan again of 2022, Cycle Plan, and Resilience Strategy. So all these things, they are directed towards taking the city towards net zero. However, they are being used as guidelines for taking smaller steps. When Pune Smart City SPV was created in 2015-16, certain projects were included in the Pune Smart City Plan, which were helping in reducing the air pollution, improving the air quality, reducing the energy demand, use of say cleaner energy. Some of the projects I may name here, like Smart Street LED light project, which was implemented in the city, with more than 1.87 lakhs of lights in the streets, city were replaced by the LED lights, thereby reducing 58% of the energy demand for the street light. Smart e-buses were procured. 150 of them were procured in the first batch in 2019. And since then, almost 3 to 4% of reduction in TCO2 has been observed in the particular routes where it was on the higher side. Certain pilots of e-rickshaws were implemented in the city. At the same time, solar rooftop project is implemented by the municipal corporation. Almost they are saving 1.8 crores of rupees, which were earlier spent on energy, by making their own buildings, schools, hospitals with solar panels. Plantations are coming up in a great way. At the same time, on the waste management strategy again, the city has been working. Almost 50% of its dry waste is being processed by some 11 plants in the city. Wet waste is also being processed by 5 to 6 plants in the city, which is almost more than 900 tons of wet waste, 1150 tons of dry waste. So this movement towards, and then waste to energy is also being attempted by this. On the EV side, again, making the city EV ready. The Pune has also taken and the city, the registration of EVs has significantly increased. They say they already 10% of registrations in the city are now EVs by February 2022, and they have kept a target of making it up to 25% by 2025. That is quite reachable, and at the same time they are strengthening the infrastructure for charging, etc. So although the needs are challenging, needs and extent of the city is challenging, but then the due to the legacy and the tradition and of the efficient ULB or competent ULB, efforts are being made in that direction.
Well, it is quite a challenge. But are we actually looking at what our future requirements is going to be as we are building today, or is there no planning about how many people are actually going to make an ingress, and what's the pressure on Pune as a city that's going to be? That's one question. I'll come back to you on that, Sanjay ji. But let me just bring in Niranjan ji and also Ganesh here on this. Niranjan ji, you are in the business of building infrastructure, building townships. Is there a climate consciousness? Is there a sustainability consciousness there? And even in the growth that you're part of, the entire push that the government itself is making on infrastructure, is sustainability at the core of this thrust?
Anand, I'm happy to share with you that the direction in which we are moving is so proactive that I'm very sure that we will ultimately reach the objective. I'm not trying to say that everything has succeeded on the first day, and obviously that's not happening at the ground level. But we're getting three-tiered approach. Tier one, where we get the Prime Minister to issue directives that we want to achieve sustainability. Dr. Kolte just now mentioning about what is being done at the city level as far as work is concerned. And the third, let's get into the private sector. We are definitely working in this direction. And Shloka just mentioned about what is being done by the hotels. But let me speak about what's happening at the project levels in terms of townships, for instance. We are now recycling 80% of our water in Powai and Thane. We recycle 4 million liters per day, and this recycled water is reused. So none of the sewage water really goes into the main gutters of the city of Mumbai. The Supreme Court has issued directive wherein the treated water for the entire city is required to be treated now, and municipal corporation is calling for tenders in order to see that the Mumbai city sewerage is going to be changed. We are now talking about electrical vehicles. We provide output in terms of EV charging across our townships, and in the new buildings, about 25% of the parking spaces are connected to EV charging ideas. Our buildings are already, the commercial buildings have been platinum rated green buildings, which means they are the most environmentally friendly buildings built to specifications for environmental friendliness and sustainability to the best standards in the entire world. So we are doing that kind of standard of buildings in the commercial side. On the residential side, we are also doing it, but we have some way before we can be better than the best. So it's happening at 3 levels. One, at the government policy level, at the implementation level, and at the private sector level. Also, we find school children who are here now. Many of our schools that we have, the children plant 1 tree per year. So when we have 3,000 children in our school, they are committed to plant 3,000 trees themselves. So it's not only a question of that at the lowest level, at the children level, we are trying to get them into a habit of learning about sustainability and do the plantations themselves. So I think it's a multi-tiered approach that we are now taking up. And I think we have seen successes in all these spheres that has happened. Success, whether it will be 2030, 50, whether we'll achieve our goals ultimately to the extent you not, there is a challenge. Remember today, 79% of the carbon emissions in the world is from the Western hemisphere, not the Eastern hemisphere. While the manufacturing is done in the Eastern hemisphere, India, China, and Asia, they already have their infrastructure in place. So we as India are definitely challenged because let's take the example of Mumbai. You mentioned it, Anand. 50% of my population of Mumbai live in jhopatpattis. Don't you want them to be put into buildings? Are we saying they will not be rebuilt? Of course they will. And we have to build it, whether it is Dharavi, whether it is the slums around Mumbai. So development infrastructure. Take the question of roads. We are now making 35 kilometers of national highways per day, but we are lining them with trees. So all the national highways are now lined with trees and other things therein. So sustainability is definitely an objective at all the tiers that we are doing. And thanks to people like TV18 continuing to bring about this subject and educating the people at your level to the public, we at the education level in our schools and colleges, also into our topics of wherever we are speaking and talking, I think a world of a difference in order to bring this as a part of their culture. So that is something which we have to achieve. And if we can achieve that, then we will not even permit the government to default in any of these factors. So I think we are in the right direction. And I'm certain that we will achieve this goal with this multiple direction approach that we are taking.
No, very well said, Niranjanji. But the thing is, the interesting thing with trees is that through the day, they give us a lot of oxygen, but in the night, they also give out carbon dioxide. So just because we are planting more trees doesn't mean that we can continue to produce more carbon and the trees will try and offset it. So that's another counter saying, yes, we need to plant more trees because we need the oxygen, but we have to consciously reduce the amount of carbon that we ourselves are putting, our net carbon footprint. The theme of this effort, ladies and gentlemen, is creating an enabling environment for Indian cities to decarbonize and meet net zero goals. Now, this net zero goals largely is also around how we consume energy, how we are generating energy and how we are consuming it. So Ganesh ji is the next who I'm going to go across to, because what he's doing with Vikram Solar is to try and create an alternative renewable source that is the energy of the sun. How easily can we tap it to make it worthy? If you have noticed, and I'm going to start with this, the smallest of the changes which is so effective is the local market near my house. If we go in the evening markets, the lamps which the small shopkeepers have, they're actually solar powered. Almost all of them are using this, and they have found the benefit of it. It charges during the day, they use it all through the evening, and then they're able to use it again and again. And that bulb which would hang from there, or they would be burning a gas stove and a gas lamp, all of that has gone away. You're talking about LEDs, but these LEDs consume electricity which is generated from our thermal power plants, where again it is a lot of coal that we are burning. So where are we, Ganeshji, in terms of really tapping into the power of solar?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Anandji, for this clean, sustainable 100 plus platform. It's a great way to connect and share ideas on sustainability. I couldn't agree more with Niranjan ji on all the initiatives that corporates like his are taking and further need to take. But I think solar, for me, the journey started 17 years ago, when India did not even know so much what's happening in the renewable space. From then to now, India has done from 10 megawatt in 2010 to 59 gigawatt today. It's a huge trajectory that India has covered, and this has been possible by a lot of effort from all aspects, whether it is government, whether it is municipal corporations, whether it is cities, with all sorts of policymakers, including corporates and industries. But I think this is far from what we need to achieve. This is probably just 10% of what India needs to achieve, as per our Honorable Prime Minister's mandate to all of us as citizens, that by 2070, India needs to be carbon neutral. Why solar? Solar plays probably the most important part in the energy mix currently. Globally, the energy mix for energy is fully skewed towards thermal, oil, and fossil-based energy sources. But in the last 10 years, the dynamics have shifted phenomenally towards renewable.
No, good to have you, because I really want to push some of the minds here today to think in a direction where we as a nation will be largely solar. Wind is another option which we can channelize, and of course there is water which we can do. But in terms of cost effectivity, and in terms of accessibility, and in terms of doability, solar seems to be right there within our grasp at every level, and that's why we will dwell on this in a little more. But Ashish, bringing you into the conversation, InBev is a company which globally has also moved into green financing. So the greener your footprint as a country, as a company, the lower your rate of interest. So it's a very smart move, but a challenging one. In India, we've been having this conversation, and I know over the past 18 odd months, I've spoken to a lot of your colleagues. We've interacted, a lot of efforts that InBev has done. One of the aspects which stands out post-COVID is this reverse migration. So people going back, leaving the cities and going back to their homes and trying to stay there. How effective can that be as part of our sustainability model, that those who've gone back, we create an environment that they can stay there, reduce the pressure on our existing cities? So I'm saying, is InBev next setting up its plant or factory far away from the city, in a place where it is going to create an entire town system?
That's you hit a lot of points out there, and I want to take this back and connect it with some of the things the other speakers spoke about. First of all, I was very inspired by what Rajat said, is that most of what we need to do in India, most of what we need to build in India still needs to be built. And with that in mind, I think AB InBev's sets the tone with its sustainability goals. And we have 4 goals to speak about there, which is around smart, I agree, water stewardship, circular packaging, and climate change. Now, I'll take each one of these to try and address some of the point that you brought up. I don't think today, and the consumer of today, he puts sustainability in his choices. He puts that as part of the choices that he makes. There was a recent Deloitte report that said 1 out of 5 consumers switch their choice switch their brand choice because of reasons around sustainability. And our brands are positioned for this in exactly that way. So, for example, Budweiser is very, very linked with renewable energy. And in North America and Europe, 100% of our Budweiser breweries are actually powered by renewable energy. 100% of Budweiser made is on renewable energy. In India itself, we have examples of 80% of one of our breweries in India, which is on renewable energy. So, whatever breweries we put up, we envision to make them future-proof and sustainable in that sense, to bring the consciousness of sustainability, as you put it, in our actions right there. In the same way, Corona is linked to protecting the ocean, and our efforts in Maharashtra and on Juhu Beach are testament to that, very often bringing the community into that. But in our business itself, if you look at seed to sip, if I can call it that, where you have farmers working on something and finally you consuming our product. In our business operations, in our financing that you mentioned, sustainability plays an important part. The loan that you mentioned is a $500 million revolving facility that actually the interest rates change or reset based on certain sustainability parameters, which is renewable energy, procurement, circular packaging, some of that. Now, when more and more people hit cities, it becomes more and more important for us to be sustainable, more conscious environmentally as we operate. And there are many examples of that in terms of what we are doing operationally. For example, one of the things that we do is all our logistics today. All the trucks that service our logistics have a meter that measures their carbon footprint. So we are very conscious of how we neutralize that. On water stewardship in our, I talked about renewable energy, but on water stewardship in our breweries, and I heard Niranjan talk about that, our water stewardship in our breweries actually return 1.4 times the water that we consume to produce our products. So we are neutral and in fact positive in terms of our water stewardship programs, and that's what we are doing for a future where we give back more than we actually consume, and I think every company needs to do the same. Finally, I'd say that as we put in new chillers and invest in the cold chain for our consumers to enjoy our beverages cold, we ensure that they're green chillers. They have lower energy consumption than they did in the past, and that's an important area that we're working on as well. So these are just some examples of a company moving forward with sustainability at its core. It's not outside our strategy. It's very much central to what we do.
Well, it's such a big subject. It's such a vast subject, and there are so many possibilities that this conversation can be endless. But I have paucity of time.
Anand,
can I steer it clear towards? Yeah, sure. Yes, Rajat.
Can I come in and
please.
just pick up on one different side of what Ashish said?
I
think since most of us, I think, are here in Mumbai, I think we've also got to look at the opportunity from another side, which is the side of the city. And I'm quoting some facts which have been put out in the McKinsey, in the Mumbai Climate Action Plan from WRI. Their estimates, best I could understand them, are that Mumbai itself produces about 8 million tons of carbon, which is less than 1 ton per citizen in Mumbai directly, right? This is largely transportation. It will also be some cooking fuels. There's 16 million tons that Mumbai consumes in the form of carbon in power, which is largely coal-intensive power. And then I'm going to probably ask some of my McKinsey colleagues to come up with a real number, but I would not be surprised if there's 150 million tons of carbon that we consume as Mumbaikars in the form of cement that comes in here, steel, food, drinks, including barley water, that comes to us, right? So if you take all of that, really in real terms, much of that 8 million tons, by the way, is transportation. And of course, Mumbai has to do, or a city like Pune has to do a lot on that front. But I think a city of this nature with somewhere between 10 and 20 million tons, 10 and 20 million people, depending on how you define the boundaries of the city, can have an outsized influence on what we buy, right? So can we buy cheaper, less carbon intensive power? Can we buy likewise less carbon intensive cement, steel, food, right? So I think we should take a wider look at this lens and a wider lens at this. And we ought to basically think not only about the carbon that we generate as a city, which is in conventional terms called scope 1, but at scope 2, but as importantly at scope 3, and the kind of influence that the city can have and its citizens can have on that.
No, point well made, and that's exactly where I was coming down to, saying that one is that we have to say we've got to get carbon conscious. The other thing is carbon footprint conscious, net zero conscious. The other aspect is how do we physically make sure that cities are engineered to be by default conscious about sustainability. And Shlokaji, that's where I'm going to ask you to come back in and say, is it possible to formulate public policy? Can townships be where you would say that there will be no more jobs, there will be no more unplanned people coming in. The other aspect, restrict the number of cars on road or cars that will be registered in a particular city, and force public transportation. These are hard policies that will have to be made. Any multi-story building, which has got a clear face on the one hand, must have solar paneling. So it generates its own energy. So these are hard calls that cities will have to make, municipal corporations will have to make, and force people to get into it. Because there has to be some amount of push for this to be worked. Energy consumption is the biggest challenge. So take this forward, because our dependence on coal and of course the number of cars we're putting on the road. You say public transport, but if you allow so many cars, if you allow so many vehicles, individual, then people are going to go for it. Nations like Singapore have limited the number of cars. You want to buy a car, you bid for it, you pay extra. Make the cost of acquiring a four-wheeler on cities which are already facing pressure of carbon dearer.
Absolutely. I think, Anand, you've brought up some brilliant points. I think some of my panelists have also made exceptional points. I think there are 3 or 4 things to say here to address, what you've just brought up. The first really speaks to what Mr. Hiranandani has also brought up earlier, and I thought actually that was an amazing point, because he was talking about equity in this development, in this urbanization as well as this development context, right? So integrated planning, the way you've talked about it, is absolutely the need of the hour. We need a multi-sectoral approach towards urban planning. We have to meet a number of different objectives. You've mentioned climate goals. I would add resilience and adaptive capacity, as well as, of course, we need to develop as a country. But we're talking about sectors like infrastructure for housing and transportation, all of which is highly emission intensive. And of course, that demand, as you rightly pointed out, is obviously growing in urban areas. But at the same time, access to affordable housing actually remains a barrier for many in urban areas. Urban transport right now across this country remains insufficient. So what you're seeing is that people are actually unable to access jobs, opportunities, or services. And there's, of course, a massive gender component to this as well. What we need is integrated spatial planning. You have to influence the way cities are built, right? You have to think about what is going to reduce urban emissions. So sprawling cities with separated land uses are actually going to encourage private vehicles. That's not a sustainable plan. You need compact and mixed use development to reduce those emissions. And what I mean by that is cities where you have residential and commercial services which can coexist. So you can cut down on travel time, you can minimize energy and land consumption. We have to think about how we're building out our cities. Furthermore, planning that actually incorporates nature-based solutions as well as blue-green infrastructure, that can really help reduce pollution, mitigate emissions through sequestration. You can improve community access to public services. And I think that has to remain topmost of our minds when we talk about carbon or emissions. We can't forget the people angle, and I think that's something that's going to be a unique challenge not just to India, but really to the global south. So if you take an example of a city like Buenos Aires, for instance, right, it has transformed an urban landfill into a nature reserve. It's restored local wetland and greening the entire dumping site. And now that reserve is not only a public space for residents, but it's an investment towards climate resilience, because the reservoir is actually helping mitigate flooding in that area. And that restored wetland has great potential to store carbon. So I think it's this integrated development mix. To your final point on policy, I think it could not be more important, right? We've realized that we have to shift to decarbonization at a city level. You have advisories like C40 cities. It presents an emerging template where cities can actually share their knowledge and experiences. In India, more cities, Rajat pointed this out, and he's absolutely right. More cities can follow Mumbai's approach towards low carbon development. We do have to push for stronger policies and democratic processes towards a low carbon transition. Yes, our carbon footprint is important, but what is more important is where we put our vote and how we amplify our voices as citizens. We have to ensure that policies that are being put forward represent what we need in terms of moving towards decarbonization in India. So how people live and move in a city, whether they adopt public or private transport, those higher level decisions are really where you can see where citizen engagement is going to be important, where awareness has to be instilled within communities and public citizens, so that we can actually move towards more climate friendly policies overall.
When I see the Mumbai skyline, the first thought that comes to me is so much of glass. Imagine the amount of solar energy it can generate if they were all solar panels. So I see that in Noida. I see that in Delhi. I see that in all the cities where you bring these brilliant structures. They look phenomenal. They talk about our India's growth story. But are they contributing to the energy quotient also? Why can't that happen? Is it so difficult? Are we so far away as far as the technology? Is it so prohibitive?
Yes, at this point of time, the wall glass doesn't have the innate capability of generating, because it requires other characteristics which are required for the purposes of reducing the solar lights to come into the buildings in order to conserve energy, and also to prevent sound in the cities. So the thickness and other things are there. But I'm sure the technology of glass will also change over a period of time, and this also is going to happen. But at this point of time, the technology is not available in terms of the glass. But as we said before, Anand, there are many things to be done, and so much is started to be done. The question is, I think, two parts of it. Number one, incentivizing. I think what Dr. Kolte said is right. We have already incentivized it, but we need to move it to the next level. So when you say that you're going to provide solar energy, which is going to do maybe for the next couple of years, the other benefits which could be given, whether in property tax, whether in terms of the various other cesses which are there on electricity or the things, for a couple of years could be definitely given to the societies or to the buildings, because there are a lot of retrofits which may be required. Because though we would say over a period of time, new buildings are coming in, but remember, 95% of buildings are still older buildings. So maybe we need different type of incentives in this. On the transport sector, there is a dual challenge. You mentioned about people getting off the roads. But remember, in the last 60 years, 70 years, we've added only 19 kilometers of metro. While in the next 5 years, Mumbai will add 300 kilometers of metro. Now, till you don't deliver 300 kilometers, how do you stop people from buying vehicles and cars and scooters and motorcycles? How do they transport? But once you are able to get this 300 kilometers of metro out, then the idea of limiting the number of vehicles in a city and charging them additional tax for the purposes of buying various things or limiting the total number of the cities would become possible to do. So it's a beginning that we are making, Anand. And I think a good beginning is sought to be made. What is required, I think Dr. Kolte has clearly said that with additional incentives. On the other hand, I think the idea of private sector participation could also be enhanced. in all our corporate endeavors, whether we are in construction, whether we are in infrastructure, whether we are in manufacturing or the product, how can we actually get people to invest into manufacturing products and other things which are more environmentally friendly and less carbon intensive? I think all this will have to run parallel. It's happening, may not be at the pace at which we would like to see it, Anand, but yes, it is happening definitely. So when you ask that question, are you going to achieve that target? I don't know, but I'm certain about one thing. We are moving in that direction. We are moving in the right direction. I went to a school where we had a function and I was the chief guest. There was so many children talking about the environment and sustainability in the programs that were there, and they were showing about it. I think that actually made me feel very happy, which meant that the next generation also is looking at it. It's not the oldies like me and us that we are going to really do it, but actually it's the next generation of the youth that are going to do. If you energize them, I tell you, they will even correct their parents when they do something which is not environmentally friendly. So we got to get this right to the youngsters of today and see to it. So corporates, government, policy, implementation, incentivization, education, all this has to run parallel if we want to achieve the objective. And certainly we can reach the moon. If today, for instance, we are the fourth largest GDP in the world or the fifth largest GDP in the world, I think it was a challenge. I mean, really, we met it and we were able to achieve it. But I think this also can be achieved by India. Prime Minister has led it, but it's all up to all of us in order to make it happen, not for him, but for us.
Well, final 5 minutes of this conversation. I know all of us have got a very busy calendar, but this is a very engaging conversation. So I'm just going to request everybody to just stay on for another 5 minutes. I just want to bring in Vikram and get a comment in from Ashish before we wind this up. Vikram, why is it not possible? Beg your pardon, Ganesh. I'm just thinking Vikram Solar, so I just said Vikram. But Ganesh, let me ask you this. So is it not possible? All right, existing infrastructure, if not the glass buildings, but then those which have got straight walls, can we not design panels, or even working with the construction majors or people who are developing the smaller cities, developing tier 3, tier 4 cities, and turning out those which are towns into cities which are ready for expansion, and to work towards engineer a reverse migration and connect these, because the connectivity is happening. Roads are being built, like Niranjanji was saying, 35 to 38 kilometers per day is being built to connect all of Bharat. Is it possible to think of that the future constructions, because Rajatji said 75% of what our needs are, we've still not built it. So when we are building it, can we build it in such a way that they are themselves energy sustainable? They don't need to draw power from fossil fuels.
Absolutely. I think technologies right now are working overtime on making buildings sustainable, and the products that we make already are achieving that. One fun fact for all of you is that one solar panel in 1 year, once it's up and running, takes care of 0.5 ton of carbon emission. So this is, if you do the math here, 1 kilowatt of solar takes care of 1.5 tons of carbon reduction. So I think today's conversation was so much about renewables and solar and energy transformation that it really warms my heart, actually. I think solar itself is scalable, it's affordable. We talked about Maharashtra, which is one of the highest cost deployers of solar, of energy, because currently there is very less renewable in the grid. I think renewable is the solution, and not just from a sustainability standpoint, which is the prime point here, but from the efficiency standpoint and cost-effective standpoint, solar is the solution now. It is decentralized, it is scalable to any extent. You could, as you said, you could do a lantern and you could light a whole city with it. I think the policy and initiatives that are coming on now, and the attention to detail that the policymakers are giving to renewables and specifically solar, I think India will gradually have to become a 30 gigawatt per year generator for renewable energy per year, which will get us to our target of becoming net zero by 2070 or even sooner. I think if we compare this data with Chinese or Americans, we are far behind. China is doing more than 100 gigawatts a year, which is ultimately going to take care of getting to carbon neutrality. One final point before I hand it back to you is that, as a nation, we must look at how we can recede the carbon that we are putting into the environment. And I think before we talk about improving the environment, we must look at how we can reduce what we are doing. And these are all the initiatives that we talked about today. I think all of them consistently done will lead to that. And Denmark is a great example for all of us, because Denmark lists on the sustainability index as the best in class. And all they've done is they benchmarked how they can do carbon sustainable practices and energy sustainable practices in the daily lives of every citizen. And that's what is the holy grail for all of us.
Yeah, but Denmark, you know the size of it, and we know what the size of Bharat is. We know what the size of Maharashtra itself is, and where Denmark stands in terms of density of population, challenges, and of course the entire growth cycle of the nation. So all of that. But yes, the attitude, inspirational, and we can also look at some of our own traditional processes and methods. We can combine that. A certain amount of R&D thrust towards that is important. But final word, Ashish, great engaging conversation, but I think we've overshot time a little. My apologies for that, but this was really, really phenomenal conversation, eye-opening and of course thought-provoking. So, Ashish, final word before we wind up.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful conversation. One of the things that I thought I'd leave you with is around sustainability and the work that AB InBev has done around circular packaging. It's an important part of these mega cities that are going to emerge with people moving back. You can't keep putting in; you've got to reuse a lot of what you have. So, as manufacturers, we have 95% of what we put in as reusable or recyclable, if I may say so. That is on glass bottles, which is very intuitive because glass bottles can be used more than once. The consumer is moving towards new ways of consumption, and draft beer in many of your cities. Mumbai, I heard multiple times from many of you because you're there. Pune, which is Maharashtra's largest city, consuming draft beer, is effectively the consumer is reusing a lot of that packaging material in what happens. So the consumer naturally in new innovations is moving in that direction. Also in terms of what we do with cans, because cans becomes more and more important in terms of what we consume, whether it's beer or it's soft drinks. And most of that is actually recyclable. Almost 75% of that is, and we continue to use it in that way. So I think that's an important part and a good example as responsible manufacturers, as responsible corporates, we take India forward. We take the FMCG sector forward.
You know, your transportation is one of your biggest aspects, and in terms of a carbon generation, and you talked about it yourself. So it's possible. So reduce, reuse, recycle. That has to become the core principle. Amazing, engaging conversation. But thank you very, very much for your patience and for also contributing so generously.
Indian industry is fully supportive of the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister for net zero by 2070, as announced at the UN Climate Conference COP26 in Glasgow. We are fortunate to have a political leadership that has seized the matter with a well-defined goal. This enabling environment is the essential first step for climate and business. Introduction of Panchamrit, that is 5 commitments to deal with the challenge of climate change. One word movement, that is life, where LIFE stands for Lifestyles for Environment at COP26 Summit, are some of the pioneering measures introduced by our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. However, for India to lead and to make good on these pledges, we need Indian businesses to spur positive climate action across the business operations as well as the value chains. The actions of every single business is going to be central to the successful climate transition for India. Technology innovation and innovative financing will enable businesses to accelerate the transition. If India gets it right, we will be able to attract large investments and will also be able to garner significant market share across sectors in the world economy. Progressive move towards net zero pathways requires not only investing in new green technologies, but also proactively phasing out carbon intensive assets and addressing the impacts of the transition of workers and communities. Indian industry has taken a multi-pronged approach on climate change, focusing on key measures like positive climate action, biodiversity conservation, forestry, and land degradation neutrality, waste cycling, actions to phase out single-use plastics, natural farming, and transition to clean energy. It is already complementing government policies in this regard. Collaboration is crucial to share experiences and provide tools that medium and small enterprises need. And in this way, probably large businesses can act as accelerators in the race to zero by working with the supply chain. The increasing pressure from investors as well as consumer demand for environmentally sustainable products will create new opportunities for climate technology innovation. Startups and entrepreneurs can leverage these opportunities by bringing innovative technology to market that addresses the sustainability transition challenges of corporates. That is what the FICCI Center of Excellence for Sustainability Leadership aims to catalyze. Clean tech innovations lie at the heart of decarbonization and climate resilience. These innovations should further be backed by funds that can pivot technology adoption at scale. Entrepreneurs and startups have the power to bring new and innovative products, technologies, and business models. Clean tech startups can help to bring cost and resource efficiencies in the entire gamut of climate and sustainability solutions space. Indian climate and clean tech startups have developed innovations in renewable energy, electric mobility, waste management, air quality, battery storage, water treatment, smart metering, alternate low carbon fuels, and many other areas that address emissions reductions and sustainability. India is seized of the opportunity to harness a green recovery, especially post-COVID, and put in place the building blocks for a sustainable and inclusive growth trajectory. Indian entrepreneurs can be the flag bearers of the green recovery.
welcome to the season 2 of Sustainability 100 Plus Masterclasses. We are back with yet another session to educate you all on a buzzing topic, empowering Indian farmers for sustainable agriculture practices. And to talk on the subject, we have an accomplished leader in the domain, Jaskiran Warik, Project Lead, Food Innovation Hub India for World Economic Forum. Jaskiran has been working as a key member of the Secretariat of Multi-Stakeholder Initiatives for the last 8 years and was most recently the Director, South Asia for Organic Cotton Accelerator. She has experience in developing and executing strategic interventions for maximum impact in the agro-commodity production and trade in India. We are super excited to dig deeper into the topic today with Jaskiran. Welcome today. Without further ado, let's start with the session. Jaskiran, we have a set of few questions for you today and look forward to your insights on them.
Sounds good. I'm glad to be here.
So the first question goes, the Indian agriculture is contributing around 15 to 20% in national GDP. What, according to you, are necessary and timely interventions at industry, institution, and individual farmer level for bettering the value derived from the agriculture?
So I have to say that this is, I mean, if we had the answers to this question, we would probably have solved the agrarian crisis in India. But I think we can start with some of the interventions that are already on the ground. So I do believe that the government has done a really good job of setting up a lot of schemes and also implementing at the state level and at the central level. Some of these interventions can be the extension of the crop insurance scheme. There is a new digital agriculture acceleration framework that's being designed. So there is a lot that's already going on. It's about the execution of a lot of these. We're a very big country and a large population in our country is working in the rural sector, in the rural area, especially a lot of the youth. So some of the things that, that they've been sort of trying to execute on the ground hasn't really translated as well as it has when you read it on paper. And I think that is the key problem that we're facing in terms of last mile gaps, but also just last mile gaps, but also just trying to understand how to deal with the machinery that already exists and how to improve that while also making room for new innovations, new technologies. So a lot is happening side by side, and we're trying to do a lot of this in an effort to make agriculture more sustainable, more meaningful, more profitable. And I can't say that we haven't made progress, but I just feel like this is something that's going to take time. So if we keep our heads down and we keep doing it, whether it's at the industry level, institutional level, or at the farmer level in terms of how we work with farmers, how we create FPOs, how we create cluster blocks, and how we sort of move those forward and support those, I think all of these are drops in the ocean, but it's happening as we go, and it's not an overnight solution. So,
absolutely, and I think you have very correctly pointed out that we need to keep on doing what we are doing, and it will bring on to the change that is needed. Moving on to the next question. How critical do you think is to stimulate farming landscape by improving access to credit and widening the scope of financial instruments?
Phenomenally. I don't think enough can be said about how important access to credit is. Farming is not a very profitable business for a lot of the smallholders in our country. I'm not talking about the bigger farmers. I'm talking about the major chunk of farmers in our country. It hasn't been rewarding in a long, long time. Prices, of course, inflation prices keep increasing, but so do these for the farmer. For example, labor has become so expensive now. Inputs have become so expensive also because of the ongoing crises around the world, right? So you've got COVID, you've got the Russia war, you've got just rising prices of oil. Things have been happening that have really exacerbated a lot of the problems that a farmer faces. And what that does is that it really
places burden on the purchasing power of a farmer. So if you're looking for somebody to spend money on their daily needs and essentials and for their family, or you're looking for somebody to invest in their business, the sort of choice is clear even to somebody sitting in a city, right? We're not going to invest in a business if our families need these essentials to just go on with our lives. And that's exactly what's happening. So a lot of good initiatives have come up, including, there's Samunati, there's Jai Kisan, that are trying to bridge this last mile gap when it comes to access to finance. What is key to understand is that even though we have a burgeoning ag tech sector and a fintech sector, the challenge has been that, one, we have too many, so it's causing a lot of fragmentation, and two, we tend to try and address only one part of the problem, thinking that, okay, if we solve this, everything else is going to fall into line. But that's just not happening. It needs to be an entire ecosystem approach, which is why ecosystem transformation is also at the heart of what the World Economic Forum is trying to do in agriculture. We've realized over the course of the past 20 years or so that, having these interventions that focus on just one agri commodity or one value chain or one part of the problem isn't making change sustainable, and it's not also making the change viable for the farmers, because you solve one problem and another one comes up. For example, micro irrigation systems, right? So way back in 2013, I was working with an organization that was trying to give interest-free loans to farmers to install drip irrigation. It worked wonderfully. Our partners were able to disperse these loans. We were also able to get the money back, showing that farmers actually do pay back their loans, which was really a huge thing at that point in time. What ended up happening, however, is once these were installed, the farmers started facing more problems. There's too much gypsum in the water. The water is clogging the pores in the micro irrigation systems. There are animals attacking. In the heat, the pipes are melting. After sales services in remote parts of the state were just not happening. This was a project we started in Gujarat. So you can't just solve one problem and then expect everything else to come together. Having said that, it is really important in terms of how we expand the scope of our financial instruments, and we need to start looking at FPOs and at farmers with a different lens, not as those who require this for, I know debt forgiveness has been something that has been debated time and time again, but I do believe that in all my experience for the past 10 years that I've been watching farmers do what they do, the access to credit piece isn't something that we can just say that it's a failing way of addressing farmer issues. It's just about what are the mechanisms and what is the actual structure of that debt instrument or the financial instruments that we want to bring to the farmers, and what is the impact that we're making. And it's happening with a lot of these institutions as well, and that's why they're in this business. But they're also expanding their scope. They're also trying to see what more can they do. They're now trying access to markets. So there are pieces that need to be worked out, but in terms of the access to credit, there isn't anything else that is more important at this point in time for a farmer to continue farming. So yeah.
No, absolutely echo the same thought along with you. Just one add-on question to it. Do you think it is more simpler in Western countries than in India? Like it's a bit more complex in Indian scenario?
Of course, it is really complex. Part of that also has to do with the debt forgiveness issues, and how we've treated farming culturally as something that is that's not a business. And in the West, you have bigger farms, you have farmers who've been doing this for a while and who have sort of mechanize a lot of what they're doing, so they are able to then whether it's connecting with a bank, whether it's connecting with the market, it becomes easier because you have those quantities, you have those economies of scale. In India, the uniqueness is that we have smaller land holdings, so mechanization isn't always possible. But you'd be surprised at how enterprising farmers really are, because at the end of the day, so what if they don't have big tractors? farmers, they find ways around this. So what if they don't have big harvesters? I've seen, machines that are manual machines that can allow you to cut weeds, but at the same time also allow you to harvest. So there's a lot of innovation that goes on the ground as well. It's just that we're such a big country that it's not easy to take innovation from one space to take it to another and then sort of scale it up. It requires an immense effort on the part of the government, on part of the farmers, on part of the communities that work with farmers. So all these not-for-profits and all the NGOs that are on the ground that are working on these issues. So again, I come back to it's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work that's already happening. It's just a matter of starting to consolidate rather than fragment, and starting to build things on top of each other rather than trying to just do something completely new. And the other part of this is also that we always expect innovation and technology and everything, all policies, to go top down rather than bottom up, and that's been a challenge as well. So really understanding the needs and requirements of the farmers is something that I think we do in a piecemeal way. And if we could do it in a more consolidated way in terms of understanding really what are the requirements, is mechanization the best way forward? Do we want to go in a direction that really supports the farmers in terms of finance or inputs? Those are the kind of things, and those are the kind of inputs that we try and get through multi-stakeholder initiatives as well. So keeping an ear to the ground to understand, how to make things work in India is, of course, a big deal. And the thing with the West and East divide is also that India is actually a model country for a lot of the other Eastern countries. So they look to us to say, okay, how did India deal with the problem? So I think while it may be easier in the West, I also feel that the most innovation that happens, the most enterprising farmers that exist, happen in India. There's, something that we always say in these in the international circles is that if it works in India, it's going to work anywhere. So whether you're trying to do it in the States, whether you're trying to do it in Vietnam, if it works in India, then you have a solid case to start scaling it up.
That's true. And I think you partially covered on my next question, that was like, what could be the role of innovation in the ag sector in future? I believe that, do you want to add on to this further?
Well, I work for the Food Innovation Hub, and part of the reason that we exist is to amplify and accelerate innovations in this space. We think that there's a lot happening, but we haven't had enough bandwidth, and we haven't had enough focus on trying to really accelerate some of the solutions that exist on the ground. There are, like I've been saying, there are some wonderful ag techs doing some great work on quality assaying, on pledge financing, digitizing mandis and the market system. Also just trying to get farmers, COVID created this case for farmers to now have access to phones in a way that wasn't there before when I was sort of directly working with projects on the farm. Training farmers, creating awareness, everything has become digitized. So that's something that requires a shift. It requires a mind shift. It requires credibility creation, because that's the other thing about farmers. They don't always trust easily. And you have to really work with them, build that community, and then see if they would be. And once they believe you, once they trust you, it's really wonderful to see the way that they can change their practices and take things on faith. So I think innovation aside, and innovation is always going to play a big role in changing the tide when it comes to a lot of these sectors, whether it's agriculture, whether it's plastics, whether it's manufacturing, whatever. But what really matters is the relationship that you create and how much people are willing to take your word for something, or sort of try a new way of working in the absence of enough proof or enough evidence, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to generate that evidence, generate that proof, and then sort of move it forward. So the people who really walk with you on that path, farmers are some of the only people who will, because like I said, they're looking for things that can really support them, that can really help them with what they're doing. But at the same time, they're a treasure trove of knowledge themselves. So if something is, not working, they're going to tell you outright that this is not something that's going to work in this space, and we can try it if you want, but that's not the way we need to go. So that sense checking can also happen with farmers. And I think one of my favorite things that I keep hearing one of our farmer representatives say is that innovation and technology is not something you do to farmers, it's something you do with farmers. So giving them that seat at the table while you come up with these innovations, while you come up with these solutions to the challenges of our time for agriculture, I think that's paramount moving forward as well.
Absolutely. And like you also pointed out towards the mechanization of farms and the economies of scale that has made the case easier in the Western countries. So do you think like mechanization or service-based model developed by entrepreneurs recently are disrupting farming ecosystem or value chain at large, especially focusing on India?
I think there is a lot of disruption. So what I was talking about in terms of ag tech, burgeoning ag tech sector, I think there's been, and you must have read about the cases with, I think it's Unnati, and things are happening also with AgroStar. So the way that the Indian agriculture sector functions and the way it's functioned for the last so long, I don't think there is a way to change that very quickly. So a lot of the ag tech startups, when they come in with an excellent solution, but it has not been validated on the ground. So whether you're talking about mechanization of farms, or you're talking about how to collect data, how to give weather-based advisories, any of that. That's all things that come as a solution-focused package from a lot of these ag techs that exist. But the validation or the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And when that happens, we often find that there is a disconnect between what the farmers want or what the farmers can do and what is actually happening at the level of the ag tech organization. So I think in terms of disruption, there has to, innovation technology is always going to disrupt the normal, the business as usual model. But is that disruption good or bad remains to be seen. And I think as we continue to sort of develop a lot of these models, we will find that the solutions that don't work will automatically start, being they'll just thin out, they'll just be diluted, or they'll merge with other solutions. So I'm really looking forward to the day when we can get rid of the fragmentation that exists in the sector and really have good use cases and good sort of proof points, good ag tech organizations that are really listening to what the farmers want. And that's already happening. So there are a lot of organizations that have changed their models based on, their interactions with the farmers. And I hope that continues, because that's co-creation. And that's the only way to sort of help solve some of these challenges that we are seeing in this day and age.
Yeah. So moving on to the next question. Farming in India is plagued by microland holdings, as we know at large. That also limits farmers' scope and scale to adopt. How do you think such farmers can benefit from FPOs or CBBOs kind of organizations?
Yeah, that's a good one, because that's not related directly to technology or innovation. That's more about aggregation, consolidation. And as you can tell, I'm quite the fan of consolidation and defragmenting a lot of our approaches. I think when it comes to aggregating farmers and to farmer producer organizations, there are some very clear challenges that we need to look into. One of which is actually strengthening farmer producer organizations. A lot of the times you don't find the right kind of people to run these organizations. So even though the government is really focused on, these 10,000 FPOs that they want to create by a certain date, I think that sort of focus and that sort of support is definitely great to have. But unless the existing FPOs or we have a way in which FPOs can be strengthened, people can be trained. You need to have a CEO, you need to have a finance person. And we're talking about farmers who have, generally always been interested in their plot of land, in, what's happening in the village in terms of what are their neighbors doing. So farmers actually prefer to work with neighbors than anybody else. And there's research to support that if a farmer has to change a practice, the first thing he does is looks at his neighbor's field. And that's the way that, communities in the rural sector function. And that was also how we used to function not so long ago. But of course, now we have the internet at our fingers, so things have changed. Having said that, with creation of FPOs come this challenge of having good people to run FPOs and sort of build out, the kind of caliber that you need to compete with a lot of the other organizations that exist in the market. That's something that needs to be addressed. We shouldn't be focused so much on the number of FPOs we have. We should be focused on the quality. So I think that's been somewhat, that's a gap that needs to be looked at very seriously. And the second part of this is that FPOs are often held to the same standards or even stricter standards than companies or startups. And the challenge with that is that, again, the caliber of people, have they been doing this? Do they have the strengths to do this? Do they have the qualities to be able to make this a success? I don't think we can look at everything from the same yardstick. So I think there as well, whether it's to get access to credit, whether it's to show profitable margins at a certain time, that needs to be relaxed in some way for FPOs. Documentation requirements are so high. They're not the same things that we can do. It's just something that needs to be looked at really seriously. Also, interest rates, for example, for FPOs, interest rates are really high, whereas people in the city can get a much lower rate of interest to buy a house or do something else. So it just becomes really challenging then to create a business case for farmers to continue forming these FPOs if they're not getting any benefits from doing that. But having said that, I've seen some really successful FPOs as well. There's one in Maharashtra doing a lot of grapes, and they've expanded. There are some others in the south that are doing especially well. So I think it's just a matter of how much handholding these FPOs really need, how much can we support them, and how much we can bring them to the level where they can actually compete in a free market and compete in a way that is that's actually competition and not just some sort of handout.
Absolutely. Like in terms of many successful examples with the FPOs, it has been with either fruits and orchards, but it is still on the pathway of growth with grains mostly. So yes, a lot of developmental scope there in terms of hand-holding along with the farmers and the success that we are yet to see. How do you think that digital resources at farmers' disposal can empower them? Like, what are the current challenges in the ecosystem? Like, even if they have these digital resources, do you think they are willing to actually use them, or they are looking forward to use those?
I think this is a bit about, it really depends, because there are organizations that have been successful in showing the business case of these, these digital resources to farmers. There's also, for example, Digital Green and others that have been doing work on this particular aspect, and they've really showcased that digital tools can support farmers to move forward. But mostly, what in my experience, what I've seen is with digital resources on the health side, that's something that I've seen it really take off on. So really looking at technologies to support in terms of health rather than in agriculture. I don't know what that is. I think it has something to do with the priorities of the household, priorities of the people who use technology as well. And that there is a there's just a gap between women using technology at the farm level and then also how it's more geared towards men. So I think that's also going to be a challenge in the future that people are trying to address, how to make technology more women friendly, and see if that can sort of solve the problem of having more adoption of digital technologies on the ground. Once I feel the case is proven for the farmers on certain aspects, if they can see a clear benefit of using a technology, then chances are they're going to continue using it. So creating that business case to keep using this technology is important. I also feel there's just so much hitting the farmers now. Like there's just so much technology out there, so many apps. And farmers also, they get confused just like we do. The problem of choice exists regardless of whether you're at a farm or you're sitting in an office. So I think there also, if we really, want to take it, we've got to take it slow. We've got to make sure that these technologies, the infrastructure around these technologies, so that's also something that's missing, right? The infrastructure, the ag infrastructure, just the rural standard of living, all of these need to be improved because it's the ecosystem approach again. So I can't say that technology is definitely the be all end all solution and farmers are definitely adopting it. I do feel if we make it easier for farmers to adopt technologies, they will adopt technologies.
Absolutely. With this, we come to an end of this masterclass, and thank you so much for a wonderful and an insightful session. It was really enlightening and a brief, to the point discussion, which we actually intended. I hope our audience enjoy the session too. We'll be back soon with the next masterclass. Thank you so much, Jaskiran.
Thanks, Sugandha. Thanks for having me.